everybody.
Whoa.
Welcome to the podcast Groomed.Connect with your friend, my friend,
Brian May?
and Mike Donahue. And
David Donahue.
we have a special guest. Davey D is here, my
You got
brother.
it.
Dave's been on the podcast before back in the summer. Brian, I think you were on vacation or something, and I was in Boston. David and I did one together, so it was pretty cool. So, Dave, welcome to the podcast. Those of you that are watching this, my brother and I actually have another podcast we do together. We started doing it probably about, I don't know, 6-7 weeks ago, called Growing Up Boston, and it's been a lot of fun. David's really funny. I'm hilarious. So no, we've had a good time just riffing on different things and talking about our childhood. And we've gotten serious, we've gotten silly, we've gotten all the above. So anyways, so that's and that if you want to ever watch that, it's called it's called Growing Up Boston, and it's its own channel on
Mike, if you had a book
YouTube.
written about growing up Boston, you'd get the title right.
Oh, hey now.
Well, I said it out loud.
Hey, maybe there's a book coming. I don't know. All right, so Brian had the idea he watched the podcast with David and I last week. David and I unpacked last week. We just talked a little bit about religion and kind of our, it kind of went into that. It just started.
Yeah, we didn't plan that at all. That just segued right into, we were going to talk about something completely different. And then I'm not sure how that conversation went the way it did, but it flowed and, it was interesting.
With it.
Yeah.
So Brian watched it and wanted to ask Dave some questions and just sort of maybe recap a little bit about what was going on. But Brian, I'm gonna let you kind of take the lead on this.
All right. Well, again, good to meet you, David. Have enjoyed the podcast, Growing Up Boston, a lot. People here know that I have extended roots in Boston, so I get a little bit of it. Not like you guys did. I didn't grow up there, but I, have those roots. So a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the last podcast, though, because one of the things Mike and I talk probably more about than anything is the consequences of how broken the American church seems to be, and the message that sends to people who are outside looking in, and how we think that's really tragic because, and you pointed out on the podcast, I mean, you saw it amidst all of the crap that Mike has gone through in his life, including his experience in the church, there's still something good that he extracted out of that experience. And I really am interested in having the audience of this podcast hear what you have to say about, from your perspective, and with your experience, whether it's with your father or whether it's with other so-called Christians. I hate that word because it means so many different things, normally bad things when I hear it, but just what it looks like to people on the outside, because I personally happen to think that the message of Jesus is summed up in love your neighbor as yourself. Key word there being love. And a lot of what I see in the church is so far from that it sends a very, corrupt message from what my interpretation is. Whether, I don't care how you view Jesus, right? You can view him as the Son of God. You can view him as a wise teacher. The message, like I said, I think is summed up in those few words. But that seems to be pretty far from the message that is coming out of the institution. I wonder if we could maybe just riff on that a little bit.
Sure. So last week, Mike and I got to talking about my father's journey. And he went from a gambling, alcoholic, deadbeat dad, and all of a sudden, in the, I'd say, mid-70s, he what they termed it back then was he was born again. I don't know what the dogma was. I don't know if it was Assemblies of God. I think it was the Calvary Church, Mike. Yeah,
Calvary
okay.
Chapel. Yeah,
right. So at that point, he kind of did a 180. in terms of, not being a father, of course, he, oh God, it was hard to describe. He was judgmental and kind of like pointing the finger at, um, all of us, all of his kids, especially maybe because I'm gay, and then just kind of wrote himself a pass on everything that had gone on in the past. Like this born again metamorphosis was supposed to absolve him of any obligation and or morally or financially. He was just, he was cleansed. He was born again. That was his persona. And I remember, you know, um, him and his wife uh, were working at, well, his wife was working at the same restaurant as a good friend of mine was. And she was in high school and she came from this broken home. And so his wife would be working with this high school girl and she was taking her tips. That was sort of one of the, that was the born again stepmom kind of thing. This girl was trying to, she was
Jesus
living on
was
her own.
blessing her.
Right. So it was just for me, that was just one more thing, one more inconsistency, one more unholy, act. And so, and then she kind of turned it on me. Like I remember she put it in a way that she mentioned my sexuality and she said that I was going to have to answer for that at the gates of heaven, and at one point, like I would be answerable to this judgment. And to me, it was like, okay, you're married to my father, who, I ate government cheese on, and didn't, he didn't participate, even if he was, even if he tried to participate emotionally, he didn't even do that. The man was just incapable of that. So I didn't see any Christianity in that. I didn't see anybody born again. There was no, maybe in their minds there was some kind of change. I saw nothing. I saw more of the same. Right. So
So
that's the backdrop.
I don't want to disparage your family, but what I hear you saying is your dad went from being a deadbeat dad to being a Christian deadbeat dad.
Thank you. Right. That's simple. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And
You
I
know, my
mentioned on the podcast last week that I confronted him one time about that because I was getting more, reading the Bible, and I was pastor. Not that I was a pastor, through the mail, but um, but but bottom line is I was studying the Bible more than him, and more than that, I knew what the what the fruit of the spirit looked like and what it should look like, and he did not he did not do what he needed to do with my brothers and sisters. As far as I could see it, like I watch, he talked the language with me and I could talk the language back because we were both in the same evangelical movement. But I knew that David and Karen and Patty, my two sisters, I knew that they were disconnected to it, and I kept waiting for him to put the bridge up and let his lifestyle speak for him and his Christianity, but he never did that. He just, like David said, he absolved himself from, any kind of accountability for, not being there by saying, I'm born again, Jesus cleanses me, and, it's a new day and blah, blah, blah. And, but these guys, were going, well, we can't see the evidence of your Christianity. And it really bothered me. And it bothered me more when I had kids, because then I was like, I don't understand how he can just not, like, I love my kids. Like, I mean, I would do anything. And so I just didn't understand it.
The most contempt I have for my father was that he and I never bonded. We just never did, and that's that kind of let me off the hook. But the most resentment I have against my father is what he did to my brother, which was gave him crumbs, gave him nothing. And, a few crumbs and, brought him into his life and then kicked him back out, brought him in, kicked him back out. So that left my brother hungry for affection. And I mean, there's two sides to that because I never bonded with the guy. So that has its own, fallout. But I never, he never gave me anything, so I never expected anything. My brother, he did give my brother crumbs, and I had to watch that.
Yeah.
I had to watch that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah. And Mike and I talked last week, I think, on our podcast about um, the idea of transformation. And one of the things we talk a lot about is that, the way the church is set up is if you can come in and you can act the right way inside the institution, you get accepted and you get validated and you get, um, you know, you get patted on the back and you can go your way, right? Um, and but I think what you're talking about with your dad and the way he treated Mike and the way he treated you and the rest of your family, it wasn't about it wasn't that he was just checking off the right boxes you expected him to do. It's that he wasn't doing the kinds of things like caring for other people, putting other people before themselves, himself, and even going beyond that and just treating other people like crap, people that are his flesh and blood. There's a difference between, performing and putting on the suit and doing the act and at least giving an effort, right? To show that there's some sort of inward change in the way that act toward other people and treat other
he
people.
just went like this. He went like this. He didn't want, he wanted to move forward in this Christian light, and almost like a politician that just got caught with a prostitute. Just wanted to forget about us, forget about what he had done in the past, completely absolved. And that's where I was sort of like, I mean, if I had any inclination to be spiritual at all, that just killed it. It would, it this was he was saying one thing but doing something completely the opposite. And I thought that's what Christianity was. And I don't know, to some degree, it sounds like, your experiences are not all that unsimilar. I don't, I'm talking about what I know about Michael's experiences with, with the Jeannie Mayo, and her. I remember meeting her, her and her husband at Michael's wedding, and I thought this is like Dollywood. I mean, who the hell are these people? Right?
Friend, God bless you. You're gay. I want nothing to do with you.
I would say Dolly and her
I
little.
got to tell you, I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Oh man. Well, yeah. So, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that you had an expectation that you were going to see something change, and
Right.
you really didn't see anything change. And you sort of had this intuition about. I mean, you weren't going to a Bible study and saying, okay, this is how a Christian should act and think and behave. You just had this intuition that, growing up in this culture, we have this idea that, okay, excuse me out there in TV land, that maybe Jesus shouldn't be a dick, right? But
Yeah.
that a lot of Christians, they fit
Yeah.
that mold, right?
I don't know what Christianity is, but I know that ain't it, kind of thing. That's how I felt about, I knew enough about salvation and Christianity to know that my father wasn't practicing it. That I did know intuitively. So right.
Isn't that interesting that he knew that intuitively? And I think a lot of people know it intuitively. And when you're in the church and there's a payoff, this is what happens to us is that you get brought in and maybe like, I can speak for Brian too. We both kind of got brought in a pure way. I was attracted to what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is it. And there were some people that I think did represent it pretty well. And so I got in, but then their leader, who was Jeannie, and then, people coming down the line like Rick Lormer and we've mentioned them before, Gary and Lori Hoyt. As I got more into their world, I saw hypocrisy and I saw the showtime. But there were people underneath them that I don't think knew everything that was going on and didn't know how twisted it was. And so they went with it too, and you really didn't know how twisted it was until you got into the mechanism of it. You got to see, the inner workings of it. I mentioned this before, but there was a girl just a couple of weeks ago. I was at a funeral. Brian and I were there together, and this girl said, when you guys started pursuing me, in high school and showing me who Jesus was, she goes, I thought I died and went to heaven. I loved what you guys were talking about. She goes, but as soon as I got involved in leadership, the game changed. And that's what happens because the pressure's on to now perform. And now you have to be the morality police of the world. You have to present this image that you're better and you're more holy than the world. And you've got to have your opinions. They give you the Christian playbook kind of, like you've got to, you got to be a Republican and you got to, feel this way about the world. This worldview is yours now. And that's what gets so confusing because it's not who Jesus is, I don't think.
As we were talking before this podcast began, and what we were talking about last week on Growing Up Boston is that it's not all, you can't just throw it all out either. Like, I know that Christianity, Michael, no matter how I feel about it, saved your life. I know that for a fact. And there was a certain comfort that I took, even though, like I said, we, back then especially, we disagreed on a lot of, fundamental issues. But in the backdrop of all of it, this was saving your life. I knew that. I saw what you went through, Michael, and I knew that you had to reach for something to stay alive. I absolutely knew that, and I was so thankful that it wasn't heroin or drugs or anything. So I kind of, went with it as best I could. I never tried to, call you out on anything or whatever.
You never did.
I just was grateful that my brother was alive, right? So, I mean, really, that's how I looked at it.
Made me cry. Stop making me cry for crying out loud.
But that's how I feel. So, and then, Brian and I were talking before the podcast, and we were talking about, these events in our lives. Like, you still go back to your students, and so there's good in there. There's good in that. There are times that your students will always have. It's part of their makeup now, and you can go back and visit with them, and it's a good, loving feeling. It's not all, you don't let Jeannie Mayo ruin that. Do you know what I mean? It just, the core there is good. It doesn't, the image management is just what screwed everybody up, and she was part of that. So, right. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a real important point, and I'm glad you can point that out and that you see that. I think it's important.
See, I'm an outsider looking in, right? So,
yeah,
I don't have a dog in this fight, right?
Yeah, and
so,
it's really powerful to hear you say that because, we do talk a lot on this pod. I mean, Mike and I are trying to probably win the most cynical about church prize here, but I don't know who's going to win that fight. But I think the one thing that we both share in common is that, this is my expression that I have coined. So if anybody wants to use it, I want to make sure that you give me credit. But is that I know people who have left the church, gotten sick of it, and just left everything behind, and they're just, they don't, which is fine. That's what they need to do. I have a good friend. That's what they needed to do. And you got to do what you need to do. David, you were talking about, you got to do what you need to do to stay alive, to stay healthy. But it's like Mike and I, we didn't throw the baby. This is my expression. We didn't throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater, right? Because we saw something in there that was, and Mike mentioned it before, is that there was something that drew us in the beginning that was real and pure. And you have probably a similar intuition about what it should be like as I do. And we saw something that was good and pure, and you get sucked into it, and you get in the fog, and you get beat about the head and shoulders, and you get disoriented, and you maybe trust people that you shouldn't trust because you think,
it's like, easy to do, and it's human.
Right. Because you think these people are the God people, right? You think they got it together, and they don't. They just don't. We yield our trust and our agency to these people, but yet there's still something in there. So, and I think that's important for people to understand is that when and you said it so well in your testimony about Mike's life, is that it's it's important to look at something and say, okay, is there something good in here?
You do
Yeah.
that with
So
everything, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you can do that. I mean, I think that there is a silver lining in all of it, and yeah, I appreciate David. I appreciate you saying that. I don't want to label anything. I just know that I got pulled out of that lifestyle and that negativity that I was in, and God used it. I would say God used it, but then I wish it would have stopped there, because then I probably shouldn't have taken the job in Rockford, because that I mean, it would have probably happened anyways, but I really got a fast track into seeing some of the hypocrisy and the hero worship and that kind of stuff. And it took me, you know, a long time to get out of it, but I finally did get out of it. And I still believe in God, but I don't believe in the church at all. I can't stand it. I was at a school the other day, and this girl was talking to me afterwards, and she mentioned she had gone to church and stuff, and so she said, I just really don't like my church. And then I said, why? And she said, well, they're so judgmental and da, da, da. And it's what we hear all the time.
Right.
So I said, listen, if I had a pizza right now, and I stole my friend Steve's line on this. I said, if I had a pizza right now and it was in a box, would you eat the box? Would you eat the pizza? She said, I eat the pizza. And I'm like, well, then don't worry about the box. Like, the box is the church. The box is the mechanism it came in, but it's broken. It's gross. It's not holy. The pizza's holy, right? The pizza, the essence of who God is, the love that God has for us. That's the pizza. That's what I was drawn to from the very beginning of that thing. Was he loves me no matter what. And so, because I wasn't loved growing up, so by the people that should have. I mean, I think my mom tried, but so
I
it
didn't have what it took.
yeah,
So right.
yeah, and she wasn't loved. I mean,
Right.
it's just a long line of.
You know, it's funny. If you all could see what I'm looking at right now, I'm right out my living room window. Right there, there's a church, a Baptist church that was built in 1820, and it's dilapidated and falling apart right in front of my eyes. Right, like not even 30 feet from me. Right now, it's the shell. It's not the spirit.
Right.
It's just church buildings come and go. You know, people like Jeannie Mayo, they come and go. It's the bedrock. It's the spirit that matters. I mean, this church is, it's too expensive to tear down. It should be torn down. Um, it's just a shell. It's just a shell. There were a lot of, I'm sure, wonderful, moving spiritual experiences that happened there, but that's moved on, and it's just a church now.
Yeah.
So
Well.
yeah,
Yeah. It's good.
it's weird. It's weird. This thing is like looking right at me. I told you I get like this weird vibe from it, right? Yeah, yeah. So
I
yeah,
think that
interesting.
I think
Wow.
that's a great. I think that's a great picture. It's a great metaphor because I mean, not to get all Bible, but that's what Jesus told the Pharisees, right? He said, "Hey, you guys you might look all right on the outside, but obviously this place doesn't. But you might look all right on the outside, but on the inside you're rotten to the core." And it,
Jesus never ordered stained glass windows from Tiffany, right? So you know,
I think you are 100% correct on it. I think
that's
it's
somebody like Jeannie Mayo might do that, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah.
I just think
Do you
it's
want to hear something funny? I
go
better
ahead.
not say this story. I wanted to tell a story, but I better not. Go ahead.
Oh, Mike, now you leaving us hanging? You can edit it. What is it?
There was a there was a in Rockford, there was a picture of Jesus on the wall that it was a really goofy looking picture of him. He looked Amish. It didn't look like it was a white Jesus. First of all, Jesus was Israeli or whatever. He was Jewish, and so then you got it was this weird looking picture. So but it was like worth $10,000, and somebody in the church had donated it to the church, but Jeannie didn't want it there, so she hired 2 kids from the youth group to steal it, and they did. They took it, and then watch this. Then she led the committee on trying to find who stole it. Because the people were all mad, they're all upset. So like, we'll get to the bottom of this, and she did that, and I know the kids who took it. So and we talk about it all the time.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
there's one
that
for
was
the
a reward.
for Jeannie. I applaud that. That's well played.
Boys, can you come over here for a minute? See that Jesus over there? I can hear it, right?
Yeah,
Right.
no,
Wow.
she brought him into the office, and anyways, but no, so listen, let's wrap this up. Do you want to say anything, Brian, before we close up?
That's funny.
Yeah, I just want to say, I love watching your podcast, and even now I can tell that you guys really love each other, and to me that is a not only is it a beautiful thing, but for the world that we're talking about, this broken church that we're talking about, it's a lesson. I mean, really what it is it's an opportunity for people to hold up a mirror and say, okay, you know, those people who call themselves Christians go to work, go to church every week, multiple times or whatever. You sing about love, you talk about love, you quote the scriptures that says God is love. Well, love is a verb, and love is something you can see, and that's what I'm looking at right now. And so, no matter what anybody's ideology or their dogma or their thoughts or whatever, if you can't break down and you can see love between very different people, um, and you can't look at that and see the beauty in that and see, if you're a Christian, if you can't see the Jesus in that, then I would just say that you need to check yourself. You need to go back to square one and do some assessment and say, hey, what is this thing really all about?
And I think this is what got confusing to me was I saw my brother David acting more like Jesus by taking care of my nephews and and really sacrificing, like really sacrificing financially, emotionally, relationally. And I saw him being Jesus to those kids. And then my dad criticized him. I was like, what the like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Because my brother David's more like Jesus than a lot of people I know that I worked with in the church. And so, David, I love you so much because you're as genuine, as real as they come.
Yeah.
And so anyways,
I'm glad we were able to, to come together again because, like I said, I've said this before, you're my only witness. Everybody else is pleading the fifth. So, right. So, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Same. So,
yeah.
Right. All
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, thanks for peeking into the Donahue world.
Nice meeting you, Brian. I've heard a lot about you and all good things. And yeah, you've lived up to that.
I paid dearly for that. So thank you.
All right, everybody, like us, subscribe.
Don't forget about Growing Up Boston.
All that stuff. Watch him. You can come on our podcast too. Me and David's got.
Yeah, we'd love to have you, Brian.
Boston.
Absolutely.
Get on that. It's
awesome.
Talk about the stadies from Foxborough.
Pretty good, so I can come on and fake it.
All right, sounds good. Ciao for now.
See you guys.